In this video, we're going to discuss the cultural tug-of-war between the extreme left and extreme right, and how evangelicals find themselves in the midst of this tug-of-war. We'll briefly examine the radical left, and then briefly examine the radical right, and look at both of them, and identify the moderate evangelical response as being, to both, that's an extreme minority position, nothing to worry about. And note that it is those minority radicals that actually cause civil war. Then we'll close with a brief description of the future of my YouTube channel and how I want to be a voice of guidance for those evangelicals. Evangelicals caught in a political tug-of-war. Let's go. It is common to find criticisms of the woke left. You see it everywhere. This has reached the heights of even something like Fox News. It's very common to find people criticize wokeness, transgender ideology, abortion, LGBTQ kind of stuff. In the words of Asmongold, the Twitch streamer, I think he puts it really nicely when he says, most normal people look at that and say, we don't want that. And he's not even a believer. A deeper issue as well is not just the fact that there's an ideology that's pervasive everywhere and so many people are so fed up with it, but it's also, you look at a Joe Biden or a Kamala Harris or an AOC and you're like, who are these the people making the decisions in our government? There's actually a deeper question regarding the trustworthiness of our government, and that's a deep rabbit hole. Deep state, deep church, deep SBC, deep pharma. A lot of people look at this and say that is not that big of a deal, you're making too much of it, that's just conspiracy stuff. Says you, but does not say the radical right. Oh, well, we don't have to worry about the radical right. We're getting there. Then it gets really, really dark when you start to consider some of where those rabbit holes go. Brace yourself.
There are sparse decorations, including a few pieces of coral, but there does appear one prominent artwork of a nude baby in a sink. It begs the question, why did Jeffrey Epstein choose to place this image inside of a kitchen where visitors would eat, cook, and entertain?
Let me ask you a question. Did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself? That's a cultural question we've been joking about for years. And the answer to that question poses existential implications and possibilities that are too dangerous for us to consider. Most normal people look at that and say, I don't have the bandwidth to process that. It's not my business. It's definitely not my calling. And in a lot of cases, moving on. And most people are like, I just want to enjoy my pancakes. Okay? And you're ruining my pancakes. And when you start getting into the Pizzagate stuff, you're like, man, you're ruining pizza too. Can we just not talk about this at the dinner table? You talk about politics during Thanksgiving has gotten a lot more interesting in the last few years. There are all kinds of interesting things that we can discuss and allege. There is a group of people who look at that and say, no, I'm not going to sit on the fence any longer and live my life as a quote-unquote normal person and ignore that. Let's go to the radical right. Now, they don't say that outright. They don't say, oh, I'm going to the radical right. But what they do is they get online and they look for answers. And they find a bunch of really wild-haired individuals who maybe they say something sometimes that we don't appreciate, but they're saying something. Enter the radical right. Now, the radical right has been able to thrive a little bit more than they have in the past because of what Elon has done on X to enable more freedom of speech to say what you want without as much censorship as people have experienced in the past. And also with the red wave of Donald Trump's win in the election and with the inauguration that he actually got in with no issues, has enabled many on the right, and including the radical right, to say more and more what they think. And really quickly on that, there were a lot of accusations that Trump was going to be this fascist dictator. But a recent conversation I had kind of bore out that that's not necessarily the case, because I was talking with a person and mentioned some of the racism from a figure like Corey Mahler.
Is the Holy Spirit able to sanctify an average black believer as much as an average white believer?
This person I was having a conversation with didn't even know that people talked like that, like actual racism proper. And they see the things that are coming out, like the most recent Kanye video, but they don't actually see this video by Kanye as an actual problem, they chalk it up to, yep, Ye's crazy. That dude's got some screws loose. And the reason I bring up that recent conversation is because, okay, it is not obvious that Trump actually is the fascist dictator that everyone was afraid of. It's a lot more complicated than that. But it's not obvious precisely because your average normal person doesn't think that racism is actually a problem. Your actual normal moderate conservative doesn't see racism everywhere, and they don't see these things happening like in the case of Corey Mahler. And if they do, they write it off as just niche internet debates that aren't really a problem. But my point is that it's actually those niche radicals and minority groups that actually push the envelope. And when you have two opposing radical sides pushing and pushing and pushing, eventually it reaches what Mickelson recently referred to as an omega point.
I really don't want to be derogatory, but it feels just like NPCs who are just getting caught up and the centrifugal force is just churning the dialectic. They're just round and round they go, and it's almost like lightning speed towards the omega point. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Stop, just step out. Right. You know?
She in this interview with Mick mentions this omega point that refers to the ultimate endpoint of evolution and cosmic development. So I guess the evolution, especially when you talk about memes and Richard Dawkins' idea of a meme being an evolutionary culturally captured thing, a snapshot of something cultural. So is there an omega point in which these two memes of the radical left and the radical right clash? And what is that omega point? And I don't hear enough people say this, in my opinion, but would that omega point not be civil war? Right? Wouldn't it be? There are ways in which the accusation about Trump is true and false. That Trump represents something for some radicals on the right, but that doesn't mean that he is that exact thing, but it's something that those radicals can hitch themselves to. They can hitch themselves to Trump and actually push for what some have referred to as accelerationism, that once Trump gets in office, it can further create a cultural divide so that the society as we know it can kind of crumble, and then we can rebuild something in its place.
The only reason we have Muslims here is because Jews are letting them in. Who has been saying refugees welcome for?
This guy calls himself a Christian. Whatever, if he wants to think that he's a Christian. What's more troubling is that his followers think he is. Again, you might look at that and say, that's a minority. Now, the issue is that evangelicals see these two extremes, and they look at both of them and say, you're a joke and you're a joke.
Now, when Kanye West, an African-American, a black man, dresses up in a Ku Klux Klan outfit, what's he saying to you? Like, if the Ku Klux Klan is evil because of their persecution, execution, and lynching of black people and their belief that that's something that they should be allowed to do, and it ain't even wrong because black people are subhuman. I am a black person and I wear that. It's his right. That's what he's playing with that as an artist.
Maybe a little bit outside the Overton window who are pulling it, while there are other guys inside, who are pushing. I think the left has a better understanding of strategy when it comes to using their radicals. They want to win.
So you might look at that and say, oh, well, that's just Joel. He's being crazy. That's just crazy Joel. Yeah, but then what about Russell Brand? Oh, well, that's just Brand. Brand's losing his mind. Oh, well, what about Candace? Oh, well, she's nuts. What about Tucker? Yeah, he's losing it. Kanye, you can do that for Kanye, but it's like these voices are stacking up to the point that this is gaining a lot of traction, and they all have large platforms, maybe a lot of audience overlap, but at the end of the day, you're talking about hundreds of thousands, if not potentially millions of people. And that's the people that are actually viewing the thing and liking the thing. Hundreds of thousands of people liking the thing. What about the people that see it come across their feed and they don't say anything? What about the fact that this is a conversation that nobody wants to talk about? And then you ask the question, what about the day where a song like Ye's latest song is played on the radio? What if there's enough money given to it? What if it's more culturally acceptable because the envelope was pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed? It was all because, well, Ye is getting out there and he's saying it over and over and over and pushing and pushing and pushing so that it makes it more comfortable for us to say the one bad thing that we're not supposed to say, like what Brandon was saying. These people are advocating for us as a society to stop agreeing on what's evil. And that's a problem. And then evangelicals look at that and they say, okay, well, I'm a normal person and I voted for Trump, So was he a fascist dictator all along or not? And I think it's more complicated than that, because I think what happened was he represented a lot of conservatives and traditional values, and so also did some of the radical right. And what they did was they saw Trump and hitched to his wagon alongside all of the normal conservatives.
I think the left has a better understanding of strategy when it comes to using their radicals. They want to win.
A lot of normal conservatives don't think that way, but the tricky issue that they find themselves stuck in is they don't agree with the no enemies on the right principle, and they're not allies with Joel, and yet they share some of the same leftist enemies as Joel: transgender ideology, so on and so on. So then evangelicals say, what are we supposed to do? Because up to this point, these internet controversies have been just that. They've been on the internet, and even then, oftentimes, they find themselves on the fence, and they think, I don't know if I want to take a stand on this issue. Not taking a stand on this issue is taking a stand. What if I do take a stand? What if it's the wrong stand? What if I have to sacrifice some of my moral convictions in order to take a stand? Then you ask the question, what about when those online controversies bring about themselves more and more and more into real life? And what was at first just internet speech issues now becomes real life violence. Whose side do they join? Where do they position themselves? Who do they align with? And do they have to sacrifice moral conviction in order to do so? That's where my YouTube channel comes in. So basically, I made videos for about 6 months that deal with a lot of these issues and the developments of the new right. All of those videos you can see as season 1 of Brave New Tube. Remember the transitions with all the purple swirlies? Yeah, Brave New Tube, confessing the faith in the cloud. We did that for about 6 months, and that was what we will call season 1 of Brave New Tube. But for the past few videos, the videos with the yellow swirlies, they've been a little bit different. And what's all that about? Those are what I'm calling just general Bob the Baptist videos. How you can see those is basically, we are still talking about evangelicalism and some of the issues that we have with evangelicalism, but we approach those with a much more lighthearted take. And what we're going to continue to do is make these Bob the Baptist videos trying to build up anticipation for Brave New Tube Season 2, where we're going to continue to discuss the new right and its developments and address questions like, who is Pete Hegseth? What about Candace Owens? Nick Fuentes? And probably one of Ye's new songs when it drops. Our purpose with the Brave New Tube videos is basically to say that while historically Christians have always had difficulty relating the missions of church and state, and how faith and politics relate with one another, you bring technology into that and it makes those issues 10 times more complicated. And so we want to help people figure out how, without sacrificing their moral convictions or their theological confessions, confess the faith in the cloud, especially as it relates to certain political issues. So we look forward to and pray for a good season 2 this fall. We look forward to continue having conversations with you about how to confess the faith in the cloud, and we look forward to staying Baptist, my friends.